Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. I have been advised that I must tell you to like and subscribe because it helps me to help more people just like you. Okay, we have a question from YouTube user Adahead who asked us, is medical leave without pay an ineffective accommodation in the workplace? This would result in a loss of medical coverage versus a work from home accommodation, which would obviously be effective. Okay, so lots going on here in the tangled web of laws and statutes that we have. Let us start with the federales, the federal government. There's a federal law called the Family Medical Leave Act, which will give you 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Now, for your medical condition, and there's certain requirements. You have to have an employer of a certain size. You have to have been employed for a certain amount of time. But if you qualify, generally speaking, most people will qualify. You have the Family Medical Leave Act protections. So, first and foremost, I want to note that whatever leave you're talking about results in a loss of medical coverage. Utilizing family medical leave time, FMLA time, does not result in the loss of medical coverage. And when employers do cut medical coverage while you're out on FMLA, that is the source of a claim. That is a claim. You can go after your employer under the Family Medical Leave Act if they drop your medical coverage while you're out on FMLA. Now, I understand that's only 12 weeks. So I think what you might be talking about is some stretch of time beyond 12 weeks, which is no longer going to be subject to, again, that Family Medical Leave Act, that federal law. And then we get into state laws because many states have additional leaves that they give within their state. The employers must grant within their state, right? In New York, I'll give an example of the New York paid family leave, right? Which is actually not really all that useful for your own medical issues, but is useful like your family members have medical issues, things like that. And in different states, you can have different leave laws, different requirements that employers have to give you, all these additional things. So those laws are going to vary state to state. You need to check with local council. But we'll talk primarily about FMLA because that's going to be the lay of the land in all 50 states. How should we answer this question? So I think the hypothetical that you're putting forward is as such. You have a disability. It's a medical leave, so it's a medical condition. It's some kind of disability. And you can either do your job remotely from home or not work at all. Like you just cannot go into work. For whatever reason, the medical condition is such that you cannot go to work. You can only work remotely. I can imagine right now like a severe immune condition would be a good example of someone who maybe can only work from home, right? In this current day and age, a lot of lots of diseases rolling around. Being very careful not to say certain words, certain keywords, certain names of diseases, because YouTube will then demonetize me if I talk about certain topics, which is very strange. So like, yeah, there's a lot of diseases going around. It's different people have different thoughts on all this, and if you have an immune condition where you're immune compromised, you might be very reluctant to leave your house, and your doctor might be supportive of you, which I certainly understand, right? Immune conditions are scary AF, right? Terrifying. So this is our hypothetical. Person with immune condition, right? And so the person with immune condition goes to the employer and says, hey, here's my letter of accommodation from my doctor saying that I need to work remotely. And that should be cool because I worked remotely before for you during the pandy. We gotta be careful not to use the words, apparently. So like we've proven that I can work remotely and it went really well. So I think it's a reasonable accommodation given the fact that I'm currently immune compromised for me to work remotely again. And the employer says, no, but we'll give you an unpaid leave. Well, I would argue that that is not an effective accommodation, that unpaid leave, for a couple of reasons. One, you can do the job and earn money and retain your medical benefits if you work remotely, right? So now you're in a position where you're being harmed because your employer doesn't want to let you work from home. And do they have to let you work from home? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your job. But if you've got recent proof that you did well working from home, and that certainly, most employers, many jobs are going to have that right now. You can make the argument, well, this is reasonable because we did it. We proved it was reasonable and it went well. So this is not unreasonable, and you should side on the reasonability side of the reasonable accommodation dialogue when you're deciding whether or not it could be reasonable. Now, counterpoint, listen, if the employer comes back and is like, hey, we purchased you, and this is me being silly, but like I'll give it, it's, for a thought process that we're trying to kick off here. If your employer was like, listen, we purchased a hermetically sealed van that will come and pick you up. You can exit your home and get into the van, and it's perfectly safe for you. It's perfectly sanitized every day, and it will deliver you to a hermetically sealed bubble where you'll be entirely safe and in quarantine in the office. We just need you here. Is that going to be a reasonable accommodation? I mean, that's a lot of work. The employer might not think it's reasonable, but in terms of you, yeah, that's reasonable. Like, you're not going to get to work from home if they're like, we built you a quarantine ring to keep you safe, right? Like, that's you're going to work, right? And obviously no one's going to build a quarantine wing for you, but I'm just saying, like, keep in mind, these are not hard and fast rules. It's a dialogue. The employer can say, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? And there's a back and forth that you have to engage in, right? Which, of course, we refer to as the reasonable accommodation dialogue. And both sides have an affirmative duty to engage in this. If the employer's like, well, what about this? And you're like, no, and I sue you. Not smart, right? Like, you're going to look like a jerk, and you didn't really engage in the dialogue. And like, you can say, no, that wouldn't work for me, and here's why. I need X, Y, and Z instead. Like, then you're engaging the dialogue. That's viable, right? Well, let's go back to the core. We kind of made a branch there, a branch discussion of that dialogue. Let's go back. So you can do the job if you work remotely, or the only other way you can be accommodated is an unpaid leave where you don't get medical or pay. I would say at that point, if you can prove that working from home is reasonable for you, then the employer has probably fallen afoul of the Americans with Disabilities Act on the federal level. They may also have fallen afoul on the wrong side of local and state laws, right? There's a lot. In New York, you would be afoul of the New York State Human Rights Law, and the New York City Human Rights Law, potentially, if you're in New York City, right? Among a couple of other statutes, potentially. There's a lot going on there, right? But I can't advise you as to the local and state laws of every state because I'm not allowed, nor am I fully briefed on some of these laws, right? Like, that's local counsel is key for these things. But it's just worth knowing that, like, it's not the only claim. That Americans with Disabilities Act and the FMLA claims that we're just discussing here, they're not the only laws protecting you. There are other laws in play. Although I do think in this hypothetical that we've constructed here, where, the only way you could be safe is working from home, and working from home would be reasonable, then the employer refusing to grant that accommodation and instead saying, oh, no, we'll give you an unpaid leave with no medical benefits, I would view that as a failure to accommodate. And I would certainly think that's worthy of litigation. I hope this discussion helps. I know it's kind of like, I don't even know how to really describe it. So you have like a hypothetical in mind, and you're hitting me with a question, but you don't share the hypothetical, which makes sense. You're asking a general question. So I construct a hypothetical to give folks a way to think about these things. And the problem with that is a lot of people are not necessarily going to apply their own facts to that hypothetical correctly, right? It's really easy to be like, well, I don't have that situation, but I do have this situation, so I guess I don't get help then. And that's probably, that might not be true, right? My point being, call up a local employment attorney, have a conversation, have a consultation, and see if you do have a claim, if you've been wronged, or if you can push harder, right? These are conversations that these attorneys should be thrilled to have with you, because remember, your case is potentially worth a lot of money to them. And listen, do you have a case? Maybe, maybe not, but they should be thrilled to try and help you if they're going to make money off of discrimination in the workplace. It's the least we could do. right? In my opinion. In my opinion. Anyways, I really hope this was helpful. If it was, like, subscribe, comment down below. It helps me to help more people just like you. And we're getting close to 1,000 new subscribers a day. And I am a sad little man with a void in my heart. And if you just would get me to 1,000 subscribers a day, I could feel like a real boy, like a real human being who meant something. I'm kidding around. Mostly. Listen, we're on that hunt for 100,000 subscribers. We're going to get me that plaque by Christmas. We're not going to do it by Christmas, but I want it by Christmas. We're not going to do it, though. I don't believe. Like, subscribe, comment down below.